They say that small towns are like family. Everyone knows everyone. Every secret is shared, and the gossip spreads faster than the wind through the cornfields. Willamette Valley, Oregon, was no different. The town thrived on routine, nestled among vineyards and quiet forests, and the locals loved to keep it that way. But the day she arrived, everything changed. I remember the first time I saw her. It was at the farmer's market, held every Saturday in the heart of the town. The air was thick with the scent of ripe fruit and fresh bread. A low hum of chatter filling the square as vendors sold their wares. The scene was familiar, comforting. But then, I saw her. She was like a shadow made flesh, tall and striking with a beauty so unnatural it made you pause. Made you feel like you'd forgotten something important the moment your eyes landed on her. She walked with a kind of grace that people didn't usually have in Willamette Valley. There was something in the way she smiled, a touch of amusement, as if she knew something no one else did. "Who is she?" I overheard a woman ask. "I don't know," another replied. "Never seen her around here before." The murmurs spread. She was a stranger, an anomaly in a town where new faces stuck out like sore thumbs. But what I noticed more than her beauty was the way people reacted to her. It wasn't just curiosity or the allure of a new face. It was deeper, more primal. Men stared, captivated. Women too, a sort of collective, unconscious attraction. But what disturbed me most was her eyes. They were dark, too dark, like staring into a void where nothing lived. And yet, they sparkled whenever someone met her gaze, drawing them in. In the days that followed, her name started to circulate, Lila. Nobody knew much about her, but in a place like Willamette Valley, people didn't need much to create their own stories. The rumors were quick, whispered in grocery stores and diners. They said Lila rented a small house just off the main road, near the forest that surrounded the town. The old Mackenzie house, long abandoned, rumored to be haunted, but now occupied again. People were drawn to her. They couldn't help it. The first to go missing was John McNamara, the town's mayor. He was well-liked, though not entirely trusted by everyone. He was a man who knew how to charm a crowd, and he had a way with words, but there were always rumors. About his wife, about his dealings. It was only a few days after Lila had arrived that John disappeared. At first, it was shrugged off. Maybe he took a trip without telling anyone. Maybe there was some business he had to attend to. But as the days dragged on, his absence became more alarming. His wife, Helena, was frantic, going door to door, asking if anyone had seen him. I saw her one afternoon, her face gaunt, eyes hollow as she knocked on doors with trembling hands. "Have you seen John?" she asked me, desperation in her voice. "No, Mrs. McNamara, I haven't. I'm sure he'll turn up," I lied, though a pit of unease was already growing in my gut. But John never turned up. 2 weeks after his disappearance, the sheriff's department organized a search party. People scoured the forests, combed through abandoned properties, but there was no sign of him. No body, no trace, just a void where he used to be. Then, one by one, more people vanished. A local teacher, a bartender, a young man barely out of high school. They were all connected by one thing. They had been seen talking to Lila. It didn't take long for the whispers to begin again. People spoke in hushed tones, afraid of being overheard, but the town's collective unease grew. It was impossible not to notice the pattern, the way these men and women had gravitated toward her, their eyes locked with hers, as if she had woven some invisible thread around their minds. I wasn't from Willamette Valley, but I had come here for peace. I was a journalist, burned out from years of writing for the crime section of one of the big city papers. But small towns, I soon discovered, had their own dark secrets, just waiting to be uncovered. The vanishing of the mayor and the others piqued my interest. Felt like more than just random disappearances. Something about it didn't sit right, and my instincts screamed that there was a story buried here. Something dark and hidden in the shadows of this quiet town. I started to dig. I went to the library, combed through old newspapers, trying to piece together the strange occurrences. But it all kept leading back to her, Lila. I tracked down a few people who had seen her recently, those who were still around. They were reluctant to talk at first, as though the very mention of her name sent shivers down their spine. "She's not normal," one woman whispered to me. "There's something about her. I don't know how to explain it. It's like she can see right through you. Like she knows your deepest secrets." I asked more questions, but the answers were always the same. People felt drawn to her inexplicably. They couldn't resist her allure, but they also couldn't remember much about their interactions. It was as if she erased herself from their memories, leaving behind only a vague sense of unease. But the more I looked into Lila, the more I uncovered disturbing patterns. This wasn't the first time people had gone missing after a stranger came to town. There were old records of similar vanishings in towns across the country, stretching back decades, maybe even longer. It seemed impossible, but the descriptions matched. A woman, beautiful and mysterious, appearing out of nowhere. People gravitated toward her, and then they disappeared. I had to confront her. It was reckless, I knew that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was at the center of all of this. I needed answers. I found her one evening at the local bar, sitting alone, a glass of wine in her hand. The moment I approached her, she smiled. An inviting, warm smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Daniel," she said softly, as if she'd known me for years. "I was wondering when you'd come to see me." Her voice was like silk, each word wrapping around me, pulling me closer. I sat down without thinking, my mind fogging over as I tried to remember why I had come. "You've been asking questions," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "I can see it in your eyes. You want to know the truth?" I nodded, my throat dry. She leaned in closer, her breath warm against my skin. "There are things you're not ready to understand," she whispered. "But I can show you if you want. I can give you everything you've ever wanted." Her hand brushed mine, and a shock of electricity ran through me. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I was lost. Her gaze, her touch, everything about her was intoxicating. But then I saw it. Just for a moment, a flicker in her eyes, a glimpse of something monstrous beneath her beauty. I pulled my hand away, my heart pounding. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "I don't want anything from you." Her smile faded, and her expression darkened. "You should have left well enough alone, Daniel," she said, her voice now cold. "Some things are better left buried." That night I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, filled with thoughts of Lila and the disappearances. I knew there was more to this story, something much darker than I had anticipated. The next morning, I visited the oldest resident of the town, Mrs. Hartley. She had lived in Willamette Valley her entire life, and if anyone knew the town's secrets, it would be her. When I mentioned Lila, Mrs. Hartley's face went pale. "You should stay away from her," she warned. "That woman is not what she seems." I pressed her for more information, and after a long silence, she told me the truth. "There's an old legend in this town," she said, "about a woman, a demon, really, who comes every 100 years. She takes on the form of a beautiful woman, seduces the townspeople, and then she feeds." I listened, my heart sinking. "They call her the Siren of Shadows," Mrs. Hartley continued. "She preys on desire, on lust, on the weaknesses of men and women. And once she has you, there's no escape." Armed with this knowledge, I knew what I had to do. I had to confront Lila once and for all. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. I gathered a few of the remaining townspeople, those who had lost loved ones, and we devised a plan. That night, we headed to her house, if you could call it a house. It was more like a shadow, a place that seemed to exist between worlds, with walls that whispered and doors that led to nowhere. We found her waiting for us. "Do you think you can stop me?" she said, her voice filled with amusement. "I am older than this town, older than you can comprehend. You cannot defeat me." But we were determined. With fire and iron, we fought her, but it was like battling the wind. She moved through us, untouchable, her laughter echoing through the night. And then, just when all hope seemed lost, I remembered the legend, the one thing that could stop her. I grabbed the ancient amulet Mrs. Hartley had given me, the one that had been passed down through generations. I threw it at her, and for the first time her face twisted in fear. The amulet glowed with a bright, blinding light, and Lila let out a terrible scream. Her form flickered, distorted, and then she was gone. The town was deathly quiet in the days that followed, a silence so thick it felt like the air had been sucked from the valley. No one dared to speak of what had happened, not openly. People moved cautiously, as if even the act of remembering her could summon the horrors back. Lila's name was never mentioned again, not in the hushed conversations in the diner, not in the whispered prayers at Sunday service. It was as if she had never existed, just a ghost in the wind, a dark figment everyone had chosen to forget. The disappearances ceased. One by one, the missing were quietly written off, their faces no longer plastered on bulletin boards, their names no longer murmured with hope. It was easier that way. Life, as fragile as it was, began to trickle back to some semblance of normalcy, though the smiles were fewer, and the eyes of the townspeople carried a permanent shadow, like they knew something was still lurking, waiting. But I knew the truth. Lila wasn't gone. Not really. You could feel it in the stillness of the forest at dusk, in the way the wind seemed to carry a voice, her voice on cold, lonely nights. She was there, lurking beneath the surface, her presence like a ripple just below the calm of the town's routine. Watching, waiting, I could feel her, biding her time, knowing that 100 years is nothing to something like her. Just a blink. She'd return, and when she did, it would be worse. And yet, it wasn't just the town that felt her pull. In the dead of night, when the world was silent and the moon cast long, eerie shadows through my window, I could still hear her, a faint, ghostly whisper, her voice, like fingers trailing across my skin, soft but chilling, as if she was just outside my door, just beyond my reach. Daniel. The whisper was there, every night, faint, persistent, calling to me like a twisted lullaby that crawled into my mind and took root. Sometimes, in those suffocating moments before sleep, I'd feel it, the weight of eyes in the darkness, watching, waiting for me to slip. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, just beyond the reach of the lamplight. I'd turn, heart pounding, but there was never anything there, at least nothing I could see. Lila wasn't gone. She never would be. And as the shadows crept closer each night, I knew this was only the beginning. What she had started in Willamette Valley wasn't over. It had simply been paused, like a clock counting down to something inevitable. I try to tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks, but deep down I know better. She's still out there, waiting in the shadows, whispering my name. And I wonder, how long before she comes for me? Do you dare to uncover the truth behind the Siren of Shadows? Her whispers still linger in the dark, waiting for the next soul to be tempted. Subscribe to Scary Stories 2U and uncover more terrifying tales. Just be careful what you wish for. Once she has you, there's no escape.